This episode contains material that might be triggering for some. If you need to stop the podcast at any time to take care of yourself, please do so.
If you need support, you can call the 24/7 National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me. Hello, everyone.
Hi, guys.
And welcome to Q&A number 34.
We're inching closer to your birthday every time.
It's true. We'll get there someday. Also, if we sound a little punchy, Michelle and I have been doing a lot of marathon recording in the last few days.
We really have. Yeah. All the Q&As are blurring together before our eyes, but we want to get them done for you before this baby comes out. So
every intro, we're like, wee!
Yep, pretty much.
So, plus, apparently, as probably no one is surprised, I am always plagued by the headaches because they are evil.
Yeah, but you're doing great.
Thanks. Better than last time.
This is true.
All right, you start us off today.
I do. And this was one where we did edit it down quite a bit, but we're hoping that we get at the main
essence
questions, that this listener had. Yes, the essence of what they wrote in about. So this one says, there's a family gathering coming up. I should go, they put should in all caps, to make others happy. One person will be there who asks questions or makes remarks that result in me feeling shame. I guess I should practice opposite action for shame, like maintain eye contact, don't slouch, and do willing hands and half smile. Or just not go to this event. I like the people and try to get on with all of them. But I'm a socially awkward person, and I'm lonely sometimes, as connecting with people is so difficult, and I wish it were easier. With this one particular person, every time I see them, I feel sad for days afterwards. At this point in the email, the listener gave us, I think, like 3 to 5 examples of interactions they've had with this person, but that's what we edited out here. So coming back to it, they continue and they say, it's a 3-hour drive one way and there's the pandemic excuse. I dislike long drives on tedious motorways. There has never been an occasion when I haven't felt these feelings of shame during what I feel to be these intrusive conversations. It's my shame, though, and they didn't make me feel it. The person reminds me of my own mother, who would deliberately make me feel uncomfortable, especially about my appearance. I think my own mother was a narcissist. I realize that it's supposed to be me that has control over how and what I feel, and mindfulness may be the answer. And maybe having compassion for myself and this person who has maybe got some issues. Far easier said than done. I don't want to be losing sleep over this, but I am. What is my role in this relationship? Do I antagonize the other person?
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know, so just to own what my immediate response was when I read this through the first time, was like, I just felt really protective towards the listener. Like, I don't know. I know we, for good reason, edited out the specific examples, but just reading through them, I was like, ooh, that person seems like a bitch.
Yeah, like that person would push my buttons.
Exactly. Right? Like, yeah, I mean, I might not, everybody's sensitive to different things, but I think kind of unanimously, it sounds like she's just unkind and kind of rude and unthoughtful. Anyway, that's just my first blush of response, not any sort of advice or anything else in there. So first of all, I just want to say, if you don't want to go, I super support not going. to put yourself in a place where you know you're going to feel that way. Absolutely keep working on yourself, trying to help yourself be in a place where you feel like you're better able to withstand that kind of stimulus without feeling shame. But also you have the right not to wallow into a situation that you know is going to be super uncomfortable for you. So most of what I'm going to say is geared towards if you do decide to go. But before I get into any of that, like, you totally have the right not to go. So I just am not going to be focusing on that because I guess for that, we'll get there. Mostly be fast and or dear man for explaining to the people why you're not going. Mm-hmm. But if you are going, I think nary has an example been made that was more well suited to cope ahead / effective rethinking with paired relaxation. Yeah. Like, here we go. This is perfect. I especially, and I know that I like cope ahead better, but also I tend to lean towards it being a little bit of a better fit here, right? Like, you've had so many interactions with this person, you can probably do a halfway decent job of running through how an interaction with them might go. And it seems less like you're plagued by some, I don't know, initial thought that you have that you're taking into the situation, and more by your emotional response after how they treat you. And so there's a number of different ways this could go. I don't know how you'd like to behave with this person. If I were, master of the universe, I'd be super excited to see you set boundaries and just not engage in conversation with them at all. Because it seems like that might be the easiest way to not end up feeling shame, is to just not give them the chance to treat you that way. But however you want to respond, whatever seems to you to be the healthiest way for you to respond and the way that you would feel the most proud of yourself responding, this is where cope ahead comes in perfectly, right? You get to imagine yourself behaving the way you want to over and over and over and over again, which gives you far better chances of actually reacting that way in the moment. So I do feel like this is just tailor-made for cope ahead. But again, we all have our preferences, and effective rethinking with paired relaxation can accomplish a lot of the same things. I also put in here with fast, because it does seem to me, again, I know we didn't reference them, but in some of the examples that were originally in the email, like, this person is kind of coming up against your values, and fast is to stand firm in your values. Also meant for ways that you can, gosh, Michelle, how do they phrase that priority in the interpersonal effectiveness module? Is it
self-respect?
Self-respect. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I think that, shame is often kind of the antithesis to self-respect. And so using some fast to kind of stand firm in and defend your self-respect may also be another tool to bring into the situation. Maybe a tool you can imagine yourself using through cope ahead. And those are kind of the two DBT skills that I would lean towards the hardest, though you make a lot of good ones that you mentioned in the email as well. Michelle's going to go more into that, so I won't cover too much that. And then also, yes, self-compassion. Please have compassion for yourself. Oodles of compassion for yourself. It can be good to have compassion for the other person as well. In fact, I'd say overarchingly, having compassion for people is a good and healthy thing. And don't let your compassion for this other person mean you turn yourself into a doormat for them. Like, you can have compassion for how they got to where they are and also not find it acceptable how they treat you. Those two things don't have to go together. But for yourself, bare minimum, self-compassion is great, and I think really needed here, because it sounds like a really hard and shitty position to be like, I love my family, want to see them, except you. Yeah. Like, that's a hard place to be. So those are my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like Kate was just saying, I kind of smiled to myself reading through this, because I do this a lot in my own therapy, kind of what this listener did. When I start talking things through, or in this case, the listener was, writing to us, I start to realize things. I start to answer my own questions. Where I'm like, oh, well, I guess I could say this, or I guess I could do that. And that's exactly what this listener did. I mean, really referencing a lot of great skills that I think would be really helpful, and touching on some things which I'll hone in on. One of the things that I was like, yep, That says a lot. And it was said right at the end. But yeah, the maybe having compassion for myself and this person who's maybe got some issues. Yep, this person does have some issues. To kind of summarize the essence of the part that we cut out, it really seemed to me like this person is a very critical person. So when this listener interacts with them, the person makes a lot of kind of nitpicky comments about what the listener is saying or doing or their appearance or things like that. And I mean, I don't know about you all, but I think a lot of us know at least one person like this in our lives. For me, it's my mom. Just people who, you know, they pick. And sometimes they don't even realize that it can come across as mean or rude. They just think they're pointing out the obvious or something, or they think they're being constructive or helpful by pointing out things that could be better. But it doesn't land that way. It lands as feeling hurtful a lot of the time. But anyways, I just thought that this listener kind of, in a way, did a great job of answering their own questions as some possible solutions. Because what they're really getting at when they're talking about like, well, I could do opposite action, I could do this, I could do that, is about being mindful of like what they can control. And that's a fantastic thing to come back to time and time again when we're having difficult interactions with other people. What can we control in the interaction? Because we can't control what the other person is going to say.
Nope.
We just can't. You know, Kate named it, and it's true. Like, sometimes if we have a long history with this person, you know, they might not surprise us with what they say. You know, we might have a good idea of like, well, it's likely they're probably going to comment about this, right? But we can't control it. We don't know what they're going to say or do. And that's part of what makes these situations so anxiety producing, is that we're having to kind of think on our feet in response to what they say or do. And that can be difficult. But yes, what can you control here, listener? You can control what you say in response to them. You can control your body language, like you mentioned with some of the opposite action stuff. And I think a lovely skill to add in here, like Kate was saying, if you go, right? We're going to make the assumption of like, how can we support you if you do decide to be there? Stop. Stop is a great skill to have in your back pocket. If you sense yourself really getting emotionally overwhelmed and flooded as you interact with this person, practice stop. And stop can look like excusing yourself from the conversation and going to interact with another family member. I say this all the time, I feel like. Stop can look like a bathroom break, because that's my favorite way to recommend practicing stop. Go to the bathroom and take a couple minutes alone just to breathe, you know. Stop could look like, if you're in an indoor setting, stepping outside. I mean, stop can look a lot of different ways. But I would maybe have an idea as you're going into this event of like, what are your non-negotiables, in a sense? Like, if this person says this thing to me or does this thing, this is when I will use the stop skill to take a break or to leave the event entirely, depending on, you know, how severe it is. Because it's so tricky, right? I totally understand and support not subjecting yourself to people who are going to make you feel like shit. And also, I think generally speaking, we have to sometimes figure out in life what it looks like to be in the presence of people who may push our buttons. Like, if we try to avoid everyone who pushes our buttons, that might not be realistic. So we kind of have to figure out what it looks like to be able to, I don't know, feel empowered in these situations, if it makes sense to do so. Sometimes it may make sense to just avoid them altogether, which, as Kate also acknowledged, you totally have the option to do that here. You can just avoid going. That's fine. But if you do decide to go, essentially what you're signing up for is, I'm going to try my best to figure out how I can feel good about myself no matter what this other person says or does. That's what I'm going to aim for. And if they super violate your boundaries, yes, take a step back. But you might also be able to let some of the things that they say and do roll off your back and not impact you or influence you.
What people say says more about them than it does about you. Why didn't I mention that?
There we go. I was actually thinking of that while you were talking. I was like, I'm going to make sure to say that even though it wasn't in my notes. And then I forgot.
Good job,
Kate. Yes. What other people say about you says actually more about them. It really does. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. The other thing too, because you mentioned that there is something about this person that reminds you of your mother.
Okay.
Also great awareness. Because that's something too that can be really helpful when we recognize like this person just bothers me. Why do they bother me so much? Again, it can be helpful to look at if there are some dots to connect there. If this person, is reminding you of someone from your past or that kind of a thing, doesn't mean this person is having great behavior. And also, it might just be that you're particularly sensitive to what they say and do because of some of your own stuff. And because you might be recognizing that here of like, oh, that might be especially why they get to me is because they remind me of my mother. That could be great stuff to work through in therapy. If you're in therapy. If you're not in therapy, you could consider getting into therapy because this is good to talk through. And even if you don't see this particular person very often, what I like about this, what this listener is generally speaking to is, again, this idea of like, just what do we do when somebody pushes our buttons? What do we do? How do we tolerate that person? Do we tolerate that person? Like, what does that look like? And therapy can be a fantastic place to determine that. So, yeah.
All right. I love it. All right. Now one of possibly our shortest.
I know. I got the long ones today and you got a short one.
Which I would feel less schadenfreude, except for I've gotten a lot of long ones in the past. So
it's okay. I don't mind.
All right, this one says, did DBT have an effective tool for ambivalence in general? I have a problem making choices and I always have doubts.
Yeah. It's not intended for this, but I do like pros and cons here a little bit when you're facing a difficult decision, right? I say this almost every time when talking about pros and cons. It's meant to be used for problem behaviors. That's what it was designed for. However, we can take it and apply it to other things. If you are trying to figure out whether to stay or leave your job, for example, you could do it as like pros of staying at my job, cons of staying at my job, pros of leaving my job, cons of leaving my job, right? You can apply the pros and cons principles to situations where you may feel really on the fence or not sure what to do. So I think pros and cons can maybe be helpful there. And then the other thing that I was kind of thinking of, which, don't get me wrong, what I'm about to say is not easy. This takes a lot of time to cultivate this. But when it comes to ambivalence and being uncertain and that kind of a thing, our wise mind knows the answer. It does. And if we can trust our wise mind and access our wise mind, then we're going to reach this place of knowing what to do or what direction to go in. So that's difficult to figure out what it looks like to get there necessarily. But I would consider maybe, looking to situations in the past where you've really felt like very wishy-washy about like, what do I say? What do I do? Kind of a thing. And what eventually helped you come to a decision. And if you can recall some of those times, even if it was small things, like, I don't know, what flavor of ice cream to buy. Like, it doesn't have to be anything like major or earth shattering, but just like when the listener says I have a problem making choices, how do you decide what to eat for dinner every night? Like, how do you decide what to wear in the morning? How do you know? And again, these are not going to be things where wise mind is necessarily calling the shots, but I'd be curious to know kind of what your thinking process is. And if you're able to tap into that with small things, then you get practice tapping into it with bigger things. So those were my thoughts.
I think it's fun because one of the things I was thinking about was maybe this person has a hard time with choices all the way down to the little stuff.
That's true. That could very well be true.
In which case, the first thing I thought about in that case, which I don't actually have in my notes because I was thinking about it as you were talking, was be willing to get it quote unquote wrong when getting it wrong basically doesn't have a consequence. Right? Like if you're looking at which kind of pasta to buy, just grab one. Don't have to be certain. Don't wait for certainty. Maybe certainty never comes. Like the lower the stakes, the more so what? I highly encourage finding your maybe this is wrong. And what does wrong even mean here?
Okay.
Yeah, it is still going to be okay, right? What does wrong even mean? So I don't know. I would encourage some jovial flippancy, if you can exercise that about some things to get comfortable with the idea of just making a decision, just making it, and living with the quote unquote consequences. Practicing that on tiny things where the consequences, oh, now I kind of wish I had gotten penne. It would have held this sauce better. Right? I don't know. Like a tiny moment of quarter mope, right, is not a big price to pay, right, for just getting that feeling of making a decision and going, right, making a decision and going. Which, certainly there are big things in life where you do not want to make the decision that way. But a surprising number of things can be done that way. And you might be also surprised at how freeing it feels to really embrace that in the places where the consequences don't really matter. So that was one thought I had that has nothing to do with DBT whatsoever. While we're using skills not quite the way they're meant to be, I thought about the dime game. Like, it's meant specifically for, like, asking people things or saying no, but you can kind of maybe fudge the wording a little bit if you need to, for just, like, how it may be important even it is, or how strong the consequences are, or, I don't know. The more I think about it, the less right this sounds, but maybe someone could find it useful.
Well,
like,
here's the way that I maybe think about it. I don't know if this is what you mean. Because, like, Dime Game has its own questions, right? Yes. Which are all about, like, interpersonal effectiveness. So, like, is this person in a position of authority over me? Sort of an idea. But where I think you can take the principles of Dime Game is that, let's say it relates to what to make for dinner, for example. Sure. And the person might come up with questions like, is this healthy? Or, like, how much... is this going to cost me more than X amount of money? Or like, create their own. Is it gonna take more than 30 minutes to make or whatever? But like, come up with their own criteria to kind of weigh out helping them.
There we go. Yes, that's closer. I was like, yeah, that was closer to what I was trying to say and failing to say entirely.
Make your own dime game. I hadn't ever thought of it, but you could if you want to for different situations in life and. Decide, okay, if it's more than 70 cents, I'll do it or something. I don't know.
Right? There you go.
Very reasonable mind.
And then the last thing I thought about, which again, I don't know, we could try and make it DBT adjacent, but I'm just not even going to try, is visualization, depending on how good you are at that. And, I know that I fall at the absolute bottom of that scale, which is to say I can't visualize anything. You can do it by imagining things, I guess, without visualization too, but I think the more immersed you can get in your imagination process, the better for this, because kind of play out both things, right? Take a moment and play out your options in your mind a little bit. Like, try and see if you can really feel how you would feel based on whatever decision you made. That oddly works for me. On tiny decisions, sometimes I'll flip a coin, not because I want the coin to decide the answer for me. But because as soon as I see what it says, I'm either happy or disappointed. And that let me know what I was wanting all along. Sometimes I can't access that without some external nudge. And similarly, I think sort of imagining your way through the process might help you better judge, sort of the internal knowing that you don't know how to get to otherwise, which I guess wraps back around a little bit to your wise mind kind of idea, Michelle. Something in you probably knows. There's just what are the doors that you can use to get at them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's my thoughts.
Yep. Nice. Okay. So before I read the next one, I mean, we put trigger warnings at the beginning of episodes, especially when we're going to be talking about self-harm as part of the episode. But I guess I just want to pause here before I read and give, I suppose, an extra trigger warning. In case self-harm is something that you struggle with, this next one I read might be triggering for you. But I don't know, it felt important to include because I think it's something that a lot of people can relate to with like what this listener described. So just listen with caution if self-harm is something that you're struggling with. Okay, and now I will dive into it.
It is a long one.
It is a long one, yes. And we give some background at the beginning that, I don't know, probably isn't too relevant, but I liked that this listener talked through everything they've been working on. So it says, "Hi, Michelle and Kate. I was introduced to DBT and CBT back in 2016 and attended each program twice throughout the years. Last year, because of another mental breakdown, I had attended CBT once again, but online due to COVID. Instead of doing DBT classes online, I have decided to join several support groups online, such as through Facebook groups and Zoom sessions, since I was already familiar with DBT. This gave me more opportunity to practice and relearn the skills at my own pace. This is also how I found your guys' podcast as well. I'm thankful to have found you guys. I enjoy listening to your podcast every time I'm driving in my car. Every day I am finding ways to practice, since most of us know that CBT and DBT take a lot of practice. I decided to send an email because the topic may be triggering to some, and I want to make sure that I word things carefully. In the past, I've had issues with doing self-harm with sharp objects when I'm having an extreme breakdown? I think I said breakdown. Breakdown with a D that I wasn't able to fully control. Although I have gotten better about not doing self-harm, yay, I have noticed that there are times when I'm doing something and I get uncomfortable, and my mind flashes back to when I have used the sharp objects. Around Halloween back in 2018, I got that uncomfortable feeling and flashback as I stabbed a pumpkin to cut it. I hadn't thought too much about it at the beginning before cutting the pumpkin, but when I had self-harmed before, it felt just like that when I cut into the pumpkin. I haven't carved a pumpkin since because of that. The other day, my mom had asked me to cut open a watermelon that was given to her from a neighbor. I didn't think much of it when I had the watermelon and knife with me, but once that knife went into the watermelon, that flashback and uncomfortable feeling came back to me. I stood there and paused for a moment thinking about what was going through my head. It took me a while to cut the watermelon for my mom. I'm feeling that every time I carve into an object such as a pumpkin, watermelon, or anything similar, I will get these uncomfortable feelings and flashbacks. It kept me up most of the night because I wouldn't get that flashback out of my head. I want to be able to cut fruits and vegetables without having to feel uncomfortable. What are some coping skills I can use to help me get past this?"
Okie dokie. I will try to be relatively brief. Which I guess I do pretty well anyway. So the first things that I thought about were, I apparently didn't finish writing my notes on this. So that's funny. Winging it halfway. But the first thing I thought about is what to do, I guess, kind of during, if you're going to cut up a fruit or a vegetable, right? Mm-hmm. So your mom hands you another watermelon and you're like, well, fuck. Now what? So almost in order of what I think would be the most useful. First thing I thought about was the T in accepts, right? Push everything else out of your mind as much as humanly possible by just focusing on something else. I don't think it was this episode. I think it was another one where I was saying that, the 4-letter words starting with the letter L, listing those is a great thing that I love and many of my clients have sworn by. Also, counting backwards from 1,000 by increasing prime numbers. That one I really hate, but it works. Right, something that just is absolutely engrossing. If you have a favorite TV or movie series, trying to name every single named character in them in order of appearance. Go ahead, have fun. That's a fun exercise if you are a fan of something. Right, just something that fully occupies your mind. I don't know where you live, but if you were in the US, you might be like, can I list all 50 states? If I can I list all 50 states and their capitals? Right? Like, just something that's fully engrossing to try and not give space for the flashback or thoughts around self-harm. Another one that might be more accessible if you're home alone than you're in a place where a bunch of other people are, but the S in accepts for sensations. So I imagined myself like blasting music while I was doing the chopping. That's what I was thinking about when I was trying to put myself kind of in the place of this listener in that moment. Because again, like, that's just sensory overload, right? It's hard for the body and brain to kind of go down this path that isn't what's happening in the present if the present is so overwhelming that it just holds your whole attention. That makes it considerably more difficult, in my opinion, to have those flashbacks or to really get mired down in that sort of uncomfortable feeling that this person describes. Next, I know it's funny. I don't think this is how any of this is typically used in accepts, but there's a lot in there, I think, that is really helpful. And the other one that I thought of was the E, something emotional, right? So this one you'd, kind of have to have prepared for a little bit. I guess you would have with the S too. Thoughts is nicely accessible on the fly, but if you know you're going to be chopping up something that you're worried about having this experience with, maybe put on like a favorite comedy show in the background or a comedy podcast or something else. Maybe put on your favorite upbeat music and listen to. It doesn't have to be as intense as in the S part of it if you don't want it to be, but just something that really hits you in the feels, but in feels that are wildly opposed to the feelings associated with self-harm. I think that's something that could also be pretty protective, especially if you start that thing before you start the activity of chopping something up or whatever it is that's triggering for you. And last but certainly not least is also the I in improve, right? For, oh wait, no, not the I. Oh, damn it. No, V is brief vacation. Yeah. I is imagination.
Imagery.
Right? Mm-hmm. Imagery. Oh, I'm like, my brain was like visualization. That's a V. But the V is brief vacation. Damn it. Okay. Imagery. There we go. So, I don't know. Probably people who are listening to this right now have already heard me do the safe space closing meditation. I know it's attached to the self-soothing with the 5 senses episode, and it's also one that we released separately. So if you didn't get a chance to listen to it separately, I recommend it. But going to your safe space in your mind, if you're really good at visualization, at bringing that imagery up for yourself, like, hang out in there while you're doing this activity, right? Again, this is your safe space. Nothing bad can happen in there, right? And that might also be decently protective while you're doing that. Last couple of things. Nope, Michelle, you're talking about something very similar to that. I will leave that part alone. Actually, you're covering all the rest of the second half of what I was going to say, so I love it. We'll just tag team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I was going to be like, you can't avoid things forever, but I think you're sort of touching on that with the exposure therapy, right? Yeah. The more you avoid things, the more your anxiety is like, hell yes, we were right. Make her avoid it harder. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to get stuck avoiding more and more and more and more and more and more activities.
Right. Yep. Because that was one of the things that really overarchingly stood out to me about this listener writing in, is when this listener says towards the end, like, I want to be able to do these things. I want to be able to carve a pumpkin. I want to be able to cut up fruit and not be getting these flashbacks. that's what I want. Like, that's my goal, is to be able to do these things and have it be a different experience. So if that's what you're wanting, the only way you really get there, as hard as it may be, is to, like Kate was just touching on, practice and figure out ways to expose yourself to the thing that's going to feel safe. What also stood out to me here, because this listener mentions 2 examples, right? The pumpkin in 2018 and then the watermelon, which was really recent. Like, even though the pumpkin was a couple years ago, when this recent incident happened with the watermelon, it really sounds like the listener was able to, like, catch it immediately, of like, whoa, I'm getting triggered by this, like, right away. That's huge. So I just want to point that out, though. Like, that really is a sign, I think, of the work that this listener has done, of being able to catch yourself in that moment of like, and I'm starting to flashback, like, and I'm starting to feel flooded. Because half the battle sometimes is knowing the triggers. Mm-hmm. Knowing what is going to lead to you feeling that way, so then you can create a plan around it. And at this point, this listener has kind of realized, hey, when I am cutting produce of some kind with a sharp object, this reminds me of when I once was self-harming. Those dots have been connected. So that's a good thing, to have that awareness. And now it's really just about, I think, kind of creating a plan for before and after. Kate talked about some great things that you can do during. So I love all of that. But, you know, if, let's say, your mom were to come over tomorrow and be like, hey, can you help me cut up this watermelon? You know that's a trigger at this point, right? And I'm guessing you probably have some pretty good tools that you can draw from anyways, because you've gone through DBT and CBT and all of that. You know, maybe some breathing techniques that would really help. Or again, you can dive into some of the stuff that Kate was talking about. But you can take this moment to kind of pause to determine for yourself, am I in a position where I can say yes or no to this right now? And if I do say yes to this, how am I going to take care of myself while I do it? Also, in terms of kind of planning beforehand, like, especially if you are wanting to practice this, it's really important that you do things before and after. Don't just go into your kitchen tomorrow and pick up a random fruit and start cutting it. Don't do that without having a plan. Because if you do too much too fast, then it could be counterproductive with what you're wanting. So, I mean, I feel like we've been talking about it a lot recently, but effective rethinking and paired relaxation. I mean, it's really great for getting mentally prepared for things that you know are going to be, triggering or overwhelming for you. So you can practice some of that and then go do it, right? And use some of the stuff that Kate was talking about. And then after it's done, self-soothe. Like, be really nice to yourself. I know, I took it, huh? Do some self-soothing. Also, the flip side, right, is that if, let's say, you find yourself feeling really, like, emotionally activated, like, you went to go cut something up and you were like, wah, like, had a moment where, again, you really flashed back and it was really hard, and now you're really elevated. Tip might help to kind of be able to, like, do something with that energy and bring you back down so that you don't turn to self-harm if it was really triggering for you. And to just, go really slow with yourself. Like, you can stop at any point, right? If you start I can talk. If you start chopping something up, and again, you're just feeling really overwhelmed, don't keep pushing yourself. Stop right then. Take a step back. Go self-soothe or go use tip. Either way, whichever one you're feeling like you really need. And it doesn't mean that you failed. That just gives you information. That's just where you were that day. You can try again later and just be really patient with yourself. So.
I like it.
Yeah.
All right. Last one.
Yep.
Okay. This one says, can we talk about radical acceptance? I'm in a bad situation, and I feel like it's not acceptable, even though it will be a while before I can change it. If I radically accept it, I am worried I will lose my drive to get out. But I'm so miserable in the moment dealing with where I'm at, and it's going to be a while before I can get out. What can work instead when you're dealing with an unacceptable but also unchangeable situation?
Yeah. A little bit of self-disclosure here, because I've talked about it more on our other podcast, The Couch and the Chair. We have a whole episode where I basically talked about a past relationship that I was in. And the person I was with was struggling with alcoholism. And I don't know what this listener is struggling with. I sense it's a relationship. That's my gut feeling, but I don't know what the issues are in that relationship. So I had, I guess you could say, like, my quote unquote, like, rock bottom moment with my ex, where, like, I couldn't be in denial anymore that he had a drinking problem. Like, I saw it. It was bad. There was a particular event that was really awful. And that was in August of 2016. And I didn't get around to ending that relationship until March of 2017. It took me, I think that's more than 6 months. I'm trying to do math.
It's 7.
7, yeah. To actually then get out, in my case. For some people, it goes much quicker. For some people, it takes much, much longer. So here's the thing, is like, it's so important to be patient with yourself. And I hear you when you say, like, I'm worried I'm going to lose my drive to get out. But I don't know. Radical acceptance, as we say all the time, is this process where you just, it will keep coming back up if you're really using the skill. Honestly, like, it will. There may be times where you want to, like, stick your head in the sand and not see the problems, but if you're really using radical acceptance and your eyes are wide open, you're going to keep seeing the same problems. It's just going to happen. This is not really anything in the realm of DBT, but I thought it would be helpful to share, which is talking a little bit about the stages of change model. So this is something that's used in a therapeutic modality, you could say, called motivational interviewing. It's used a lot, actually, with people who are struggling with addiction. Mm-hmm. And basically, there are 5 stages of change. So I'll name them, and then I'll briefly explain each one. So there's pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. So those are the 5. Pre-contemplation means that this person has no idea, no awareness that there is anything wrong with what they are doing. Complete denial, basically, is pre-contemplation. Contemplation, the second stage, is where the person actually starts to go, I think there's a problem here. Something's going on. This isn't working, right? If we take the example of addiction, this is when someone goes, maybe I am an alcoholic, right? Preparation means that they are actually considering making a change. This might be where somebody starts looking into treatment centers, for example, or they maybe start playing around with, like, what if I don't drink today? How do I feel? They're considering taking actual steps. Action is when they do take those steps. This is when they actually get into treatment. This is when they actually start going to 12-step meetings. Kind of an idea. And then maintenance is this idea that essentially you've reached a point where you've kind of met the goal you've wanted. If the goal was sobriety, this is when you get people who are like, yep, I've been sober for like 10 years and counting, kind of a thing. they figured out a routine of how to maintain the goal that they were wanting. Now, here's why I bring this up with what this listener talked about. Radical acceptance, that skill, most closely aligns, in my opinion, with the second stage of change, which is contemplation. Here's the thing about contemplation. People can live there. Meaning sometimes people don't ever get out of contemplation. They never move on to preparation, action, and maintenance. Sometimes people just hang out in that stage. Again, if I keep going with the example of addiction, where they're like, yep, I know that I'm an addict. And they keep using. That can happen. People go back and forth between all of these at various points in time.
It's not linear.
Yeah. I mean, once you got
it's linear, but not. It's not a ratchet where if you've gone past a step, you can never go back.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a zip tie. There you go. It's linear, but it's not a zip tie.
This is true. Yeah, I mean, if you've reached maintenance, the possibility of going back to like pre-contemplation is pretty slim. But you can certainly backtrack. So to even get to contemplation is a big deal. Because again, that's where somebody's saying, oh, this is an issue for me. You have reached that stage, listener, where you say, I'm in a bad situation. Hey, you see it. That really counts for something. So what I kind of hear in what this listener wrote is like this idea of like, so now that I see the problem, I'm supposed to be taking action, essentially. I'm supposed to be making a change. I'm supposed to be figuring this out. I'm not supposed to just keep doing the same thing when I see that the same thing isn't serving me. And again, I read into this that this is in reference to a relationship. But it could be in reference to anything. It could be a reference to a job. It could be, I need to get out of this job, right? It could be in reference to a lot of things. But let's pat yourself on the back for a minute to even getting to contemplation. And the next step would be preparation, right? So looking at, even if it's going to be a while before you can get out, like you say, what can you do now? If let's say you're living with a partner and you're wanting to move out, can you research apartments? Can you start talking to friends? Can you... can you do that? Maybe not. But that would be your next step, is to start moving into preparation. But I don't know. I'd be really patient with yourself. It takes time. And sometimes when we rush, even again, when we're seeing the problems pretty clearly, sometimes when we rush, it can really take a toll on us later. So it may take a while, before you can get out. And that's okay. And that doesn't mean that you're failing at radical acceptance. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
And it doesn't mean that radical acceptance is failing you, which is kind of what. So, I don't know. I like the opening. Like, can we talk about radical acceptance? Yes. I would like to talk about what radical acceptance is, and more importantly, what radical acceptance isn't.
Yep.
Radical acceptance is not judging a situation as acceptable, right? English, despite having a large lexicon, for which I am grateful, still we use words in 2 or 3 or 4 different ways, sometimes the same word, and it gets a little hanky. Right? So we're talking about acceptance. You're like, well, yeah, I'm accepting it, so that means it's acceptable. If I have accepted it, clearly it is acceptable. I'm able to accept it. It's acceptable. And I get you. And no. Right? What you're accepting is that this is the situation. You're not accepting anything about the situation is good or okay or acceptable, the way we normally mean that word. Right? It no way, shape, or form is meant to make that situation seem okay. That is not radical acceptance's job. You were talking about a little self-disclosure. I'll wrap in just to mine. I don't think I don't plan on ever finding my sterility acceptable. It's never going to be
Yeah.
acceptable to me that I'm sterile. Not ever. Nope. On the other hand, I think I've done a pretty dang good job with radical acceptance around it. I can't change it. It is what it is, right? So I think, Michelle, you did a lovely job of speaking to how this person might be able to move through change at some point. I have no idea if this is I can't get out because, I don't know, things that can be changed, or if it's like literal. I don't know. I don't think that this person is Facebooking us from prison, but it's the only thing I can come up with out of the top of my head is like, I can't get out for another 3 years. There's nothing I can do about it. Right? Maybe it is literally unchangeable. Some situations are.
Yeah.
In which case, I mean, obviously, I'm usually the drive to get out, so I assume at some point it will change to something they can get out of, but who knows? Anyway. What I'm saying is, you can radically accept ongoing, unacceptable, unchangeable situations. In fact, while a struggle ongoing, I do think always makes it a little bit harder, depending on what we're talking about ongoing. I guess technically some of them are ongoing. I'm sterile forever! But I think ongoing isn't like something bad is happening repeatedly and consistently. That's how I
like
sort of think about ongoing.
I don't know, like, not to say that you're like not in your experience of sterility, because like you are sterile today, you'll be sterile tomorrow, etc., etc. But
there it is.
Yeah, but you're in a different stage with it than when you were initially discovering and learning that that's what was going on.
Yeah. But also, like, I don't know, you're talking about relationships, so let's just go down the really shitty side of it. Maybe you're in an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
Right? The abuse is ongoing. It's current.
Yep.
Right? This isn't something you're getting past. This is something you're in. And that absolutely, I mean, radical acceptance is already real fucking hard, and I think that takes it up another notch. Right? Because you're having to sort of radically accept something every day that's the same, right? And still going on. And that's harder. But it can be done. And the unacceptable and unchangeableness of it is even more what radical acceptance is for, right? So I just really want to separate out the concepts of radical acceptance and the concept of something being acceptable. Despite the fact that they are based in the same fucking word, which is real annoying. There it is. I think radical acceptance is mainly for unacceptable situations. Because most of us don't struggle much to accept acceptable situations. Most of the time, that happens kind of naturally. We struggle when it's really fucking unacceptable. So, what can work instead? I don't think there's so much in instead. I think you're doing the right thing. And I don't think in any way, shape, or form it's going to steal your drive to get out, unless you're doing something that isn't radical acceptance. If what you're doing is making you think like, well, it's okay to stay here, then I don't know what you're doing, but it is not radical acceptance. It's maybe denial. Maybe you're doing a strong plunge in denying your own experience. I don't know, but it's not radical acceptance. Radical acceptance is just, this is what it is. And listener, what your situation is unacceptable. You wouldn't be radically accepting it if you didn't acknowledge that part.
Good job, Kate.
I think that's all I had to say.
I love it. Drop the mic. Good thoughts.
Mic drop! Which is right better, because just to say, Michelle got to her notes before I did on this particular one, and when I saw everything that she'd written, all I put underneath was ditto, lol. So, yay. Thanks for Michelle leaving some things for me to say.
Yes, you did a great job. All right, but we're at the end of this one. So, as per usual, send us emails at dbtmepodcast@gmail.com or post in the Facebook group if you're struggling with stuff and want some support. So, yeah, that is all. And
until
we're going to
next
be back
time.
soon with another one.
Very soon. You don't even know how soon.
Because we're about to record it right now.
Talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in to your Facebook profile and search for DBT